Okay, guys. So, yeah, I had my mic turned off there just for a second. I was just giving some more people. We got more people joining, so I wanted to give everyone time. So I was just waiting. But I think we're ready to get started. I posted a link to the weatherapi.com if you guys want to join. You can sign up there. It's free. And we're going to be learning how to work with APIs in PowerShell. So super important APIs. I use it all the time at work to power on, power off instances, create snapshots, delete snapshots in my cloud environment. Don't mind my husky back there. I don't know if you guys can see that. He's back there eating a chew toy. Archer, can you not make so much noise? All right, so yeah, we use APIs at work all the time to bring down instances, bring them on, schedule them, and things like that. So we're going to learn how to do that, and we're going to work with a basic weather API, and we're just going to do something as simple as just getting the weather and the forecast. But the same principles that you're going to learn in this lesson can also apply to cloud computing and things like that, okay? And we're going to kind of build on what we talked about in the last, I think it was the last webinar, where we did variables, for loops, and things like that. So what I'm going to do is you need to have gone to this website, weatherapi.com, and you should have registered. So you guys will get a free account, and you'll be brought to this dashboard page, and this is my API key. You should keep this a secret. I'm going to refresh and delete this API key as soon as this live stream is done, because this will be live on YouTube. But all right, I hope if my dog is too distracting, let me know, and I will I'll turn my camera away from him, I guess, or I'll let him go in the other room really quick. So when you register, you're going to be brought to this page. This is the API key that I was talking about. And we're going to copy that API key, and we're going to go to API Explorer. This is this web page allows you to browse your API without having to write any code. So you can kind of get familiar with how the API works before you get into writing scripts with PowerShell. Herms is asking about turn on the mic. We will do that at the end. But that's a limit of 25 people. So if I do that right now, we'll kick people out. So basically when most people will leave, and then I'll turn on the mics, and usually it's less than 25 people at the end. So I'll do it at the end. So we're going to go ahead and put in our API key here at the top. And I put in a zip code here under this parameter value. And this is a zip code for Fairfax. And it says here you can enter in an IP address, latitude, longitude, whatever. Click show response, and then here at the bottom of the page, you're going to get the response body. And this is the actual information, Fairfax, Virginia. It has a latitude and longitude, the time zone that it's in, America, New York, and just a bunch of information about the weather in this particular location. So if we wanted to do something like get a forecast, we can click the forecast tab, and we could change this to like 3 days. I think that's the limit on free accounts, which is what we're using. So if I click show response now, it shows us the actual API URI that we're going to call to, or the URL. And then it gives us the headers at the top, and then the response body. So this is stuff that we're going to be manipulating with PowerShell, converting it to a PowerShell object, and then doing things with that data. So one thing I could do is I could just copy and paste this into my web browser. Press enter. And I'm going to get the JSON returned directly to me. Now, if you're working with an application that doesn't allow you to have an API browser like this, and that's common, you're going to just get raw data just like this. And you can use a website to format it in an easier way to read. Let me see. I'm going to find that website. It is jsonformatter.curiousconcept.com. I'm going to post this in the chat. So if I go to this page, I can copy all of this JSON, and I can paste it into this formatter, and I can hit process. And it's going to format it in the same way that I was seeing it here on the website. So if you're working with a service and they don't provide a nice tool like this for you to see what you're working with, then you can go to a JSON formatter like that. And it allows you to, expand or collapse different data. You can look at the different forecast days and things like that. Okay. So we're going to close that because we don't really need it. We have the same information here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the same thing inside of PowerShell that we just did through the web browser. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the PowerShell ISE. So I'm going to click the start button, and I'm just going to type in ISE, and I'll right click and say run as administrator. And I'm getting the user access control prompt. I'm going to say yes, and let me drag this over here so you guys can see this. All right, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see what's going on here. So the first thing, and by the way, the script that I'm about to write, I'm going to share with you guys. I'll email it to you guys. I think I usually send out the replays on Monday. So when I send out this webinar replay, I'll email you guys this file. So first thing we want to do is set up our variables. And first variable I'm going to set up is API key. And we're going to set that equal to that long string that we copied earlier. Now I need to go back to the website in the dashboard and just copy and paste that. And just keep in mind, this is one way of doing this. We could also take a shortcut and just copy this URL as well. But I want to show you guys how to structure a URL using variables. Because essentially, this is the URL that we should end up with. API URL, and it's going to look like that. Okay, so let's see. The zip code that I did was 2230, so we're going to go back to the ISE. And we're just going to say that was the parameter is query. So we'll just call it query is equal to, and then the zip code that we put in. And now we're going to set up how many days, because that was another option that we had. And I'm going to set that to 3. So just I'm going to drag this over to the left screen and drag this here. So just to reiterate the data that we're looking at, we have the API key, which is configured here. We're going to assign that to a variable of API key. And we don't need to define the protocol or the format because that's all set by default. Then we have this query parameter, and that's set to 22,030, and I'm just assigned that to that variable there. And then down here we have a parameter of days, and that's set to 3. Now these variable names does not matter what you want to call them. It's just that's what we're going to reference them by in the future. So I'm just selecting these, and I'm pressing F8, and that's going to execute that in the memory. So if I wanted to call API key, I could do that and press enter and get that information. So let's go ahead and build the URI, or the URL, however you want to call it, that we're going to be calling out to. So this is going to be, we're going to be calling to the root of this address, which is going to be, I'm just going to copy it over here from this screen. All right, here we go. So it's going to be API HTTP. Remember, we're not doing HTTPS because HTTP is the default. API.weatherapi.com/version1, and we're going to grab the forecast. So this forecast tab here, it's forecast.json. All right. So if I come over here, I can type that forecast.json. Now we also need to add our API key. So we're going to do a question mark, and we're just going to pass key is equal to, and we'll just say API key. So we're actually calling the variable up here API key. So if I press F8 on that, and then I output the value of URI, it's going to give us one string that contains the endpoint that we're reaching, which is forecast.json, and it contains our API key, which is listed here. All right, but we need to keep going because we still need to pass the query, and we need to pass the actual number of days. So the query is passed by and q, and that's going to be equal to $query. Sorry, and q equals $query. Make sure I type this right. So again, we can just execute this and press F8. Oops, F8. Type in URI, and we're getting this string. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so this will come out a little cleaner. There we go. So we have the query, and then we have days. So we're going to say and days is equal to, and we'll just say days. And I'll try to match the capitalization there. Okay, so we could just select this code right here and press F8, and it's kind of a shortcut. It'll just output the value that we're trying to get. So if I run that whole thing, it'll assign it to the variable name. If I type out URI, what we want to do is make sure that this is a valid URL. And since we know that we can access it directly in the browser, let's just copy this. And let's just paste it into our browser and make sure we get some kind of result. So we're not getting anything like access denied. Like if I didn't provide the API key here, or if I set the key to equal 0, we're going to get an error message, and it's going to say API key was invalid. So by us running this command right here, or running this, or rather copying and pasting this into our browser, we can tell that the API is working as expected. So we're actually able to return data. Now, we're not returning data yet in PowerShell. All we're doing is storing the URL that we're going to access. So what we need to do now, let's just write a little bit of output. So we can say, let's say we're going to output what URI we're going to contact. And we'll say write-host. And we talked about this. We talked about this in the last lesson, if you guys remember, in the last webinar. API call URI is going to be equal to URI. Okay, now if I execute this, it's going to tell us this is the actual URI that we're going to be accessing. Now let's go ahead and access that and actually grab data. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a variable. Well, let's go ahead and make a comment. Say, let's say make the request. And we're going to say request, if I can spell it right, and I need to do a $. Request is equal to, and we're going to say invoke dash web request, and we're going to say dash URI, and that's going to be equal to URI. So if I highlight this set of command here and I press F8, and now if I try to access the object request, we get this output right here. Now you'll notice this looks quite a bit different than the JSON that we're getting down here, but really it's just PowerShell's way of showing that information. So what we have here is we have the response body that's shown within content. You'll notice that inside of the response body, the first item that you see here is location. Well, if we look under content, the first little element here is location, right? And then we have raw content. This includes the headers as well. And then we can just pull out the specific headers. So if we want, what we can do, this is a PowerShell object. So we can say request.headers, and we get the request headers that we see up here. So we have transfer encoding is chunked, connection, keep alive, and so forth. So all that data is available here. Now, let's get down to actually accessing the content. And one thing I want to point out to you guys, we don't want to, when you're working with APIs, you want to make is the minimum amount of calls to the API as you possibly can. So right now, if I press F5 on this, on my keyboard, I'm going to make 5 calls to the API. And it's totally unnecessary because we've already gotten that data and it's already stored in this variable. So what we want to do is we want to tell the script that, hey, if you already have the data, don't make another API request. Because if you remember, we're limited to 20,000 API requests on our free account. We're not going to reach that today. But when you get into writing larger automations, you always want to try and write your code as efficient as you can. So what we're going to do is just write a simple if statement that's going to decide if we should actually reach out to the API or if we already have the information and we don't need to. So we're going to do that by just saying if, and I'll just put this down on a new line. We'll bring it back up in a second. We're going to say if, and in parentheses, we want to see if the request variable exists or if it doesn't exist, rather. So we're going to say an exclamation mark, and then we're just going to say requests. And what this does is it says if the request variable has not been set or if it's empty, then we want to do the following. And if request is empty, what we're going to want to do is run the invoke request command and populate that variable, right? If it's not empty, then we're going to say else, and we'll say write-host API call was already made, not making another one. All right. So let me go ahead and just maximize this because we can pretty much focus on the PowerShell now. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. If you guys have any questions along the way, let me know, and I will definitely answer that because that's a big part of the live streams is answering questions. So I want to help you guys out if you guys need it. All right, so I'm going to call this API work in progress. I'm saving it to my computer. We are having thunderstorms, so if I go offline, I probably lost power. Hopefully I don't, but. All right, so essentially this line of code should only make the request if the request variable has not already been populated. So let's select this and press F8, and we can see that it says the API call was already made, not making another one. Now, if I was to close this ISE, and let's see, close the ISE, and I'll restart it, and I'll reopen that script. I have another ISE open. Hopefully that doesn't interfere with what I'm doing. But if I reopen this and I run this line again, it should make the, oh, right, I need to run the whole line. So if I press F5, it actually made the request. And if I press F5 again, you can see that here, the API call, which is right here. And then we didn't output, the API call was already made. Now, the next time I run this, we're going to see the API call was already made. And every time I run that, it's going to prevent me from making another API request. So I'm sitting here matching the button matching the F5 button, and we're not making additional requests. All right. So just a little hint there on how to be efficient with your code. All right. So now let's get into the content. So we have this variable named requests. What we need to do is access the content. And generally, you want to stay away from raw content. In my experience, I've never had to use that. If you guys have ever had to use raw content, let me know. But it just contains like some information at the top. It does contain your status code and things like that, but you can get that other ways. So I generally don't have to mess with that. So what we're going to do is say request.content. And what this does is outputs that JSON. So again, if we wanted to, we could copy this into that JSON formatter website. We've already done that through the website, so I won't do that again. But there's a built-in PowerShell command that will convert this from JSON to a PowerShell object. And that's going to be as simple as convert from -JSON. So now, if I press enter, it converts this to a PowerShell object. Now, it's not that useful like it is right now because we have objects within objects, but we'll get into how to access all of that in a little bit. Another thing to keep in mind is that the data here is not fully shown because it kind of goes off screen. So we can see it appears as though we only have location and then something called current. However, that's not true. If I pipe this to OGV or outgrid view, we can see that we have location, we have current, which is the current weather. And then if we go all the way to the right, we have another object, forecast, and then we have if there's an alert or not, which there isn't. So we're not getting all the information when we try to put it out there. So there's different ways that we can format this. Also, as a side note, if you're using PowerShell 6, you can run the as hash table command, and I'll just show you guys what that does. This is PowerShell 7, but this works on PowerShell 5 and above. I'm going to copy. You can see here this is PowerShell version 7 rather. If I paste this in here and run all this, and if I go request convert from -JSON, and I say as hash table, it's going to return an object that looks like this. Much easier to read than what we have right here, which is just kind of putting it all like horizontally across the screen. And then when you run out of room on the screen, the rest is just lost over here in nothing, in the nothingness. So if you're using PowerShell 6, that's a nice little shortcut that you can use to convert it into the type of object you want. Now, if you don't, and you're using PowerShell version 5, which is pretty much everyone who's using the ISE, there's another way that we're going to grab this data. And that's by piping this to, before I get to that, before I get to the switching the object, let's talk about formatting. So there's a couple different formatting options we can use, and I'm going to paste this into the chat right now so you guys can see this. Hopefully this comes out right. Okay, that did not come out like I wanted it to. But there is, I'm just going to copy and paste this into the script so you guys can see it. There is, we can format custom. So let me copy this up here, and I'll show you guys how this works. This is just different ways to format the data so we can see what we're looking at. Let's see, format. Yeah, let me grab this real quick. Okay, cool. Format the data. And we're going to say, we'll just make a new variable, and we'll call it converted and formatted JSON is equal to request.content. And we're going to say convert from JSON, and we'll say format, and we could do format custom. So if we run this line, I'll highlight it and press F8. Oh, that came back with nothing. Hold on a second. Let me figure out why that happened. Let's see here. Let's run this, make sure this comes out with data. Okay, and then we convert from -JSON, oops. And then we can do format, maybe format custom just doesn't work on that. Oh, there we go. I'm not sure, did I spell something wrong up here? I don't see what I did wrong. Oh, I'm silly, because I didn't output the actual variable name. So converted, that's the newbie mistake. Okay, so when I output that value, or if I just highlight this right here, if I make it simpler for you guys, if I just highlight this right here and I output it like this, it's going to give me an object that looks a lot like JSON. It's an easy way for you guys to view all the data, but it's still not like, it's really not that user friendly. And once we format that data, and that's stored inside of converted formatted JSON, I can no longer access sub-objects. So if I try to do converted formatted JSON, I try to do location, it's not going to work. Another one that's pretty nice is you can do format list, and it's an easy way for you to see the actual data. So if I go converted formatted JSON, this is much nicer than what we were seeing when we just converted it from JSON. Let me turn down my sound real quick. So here we have the 4 objects that we're trying to access here. We have location, current, forecast, and we have alert, right? So quick, easy way to see your data is just format -list. But you don't really want to save your data like that, because once you format something, it converts it from a PowerShell object to just plain string text. And that's not good for what we're going to be doing today. So if we go here and we go to, let's see, where's our variable? Let's make a variable up here and call it converted JSON. So convert from JSON, and we'll call it converted JSON, and we'll set that equal to request.content convert from -JSON. All right, and let's execute this line of code. All right, let's try this again. Press F8. So converted JSON. There we go. We can access the sub objects that we see here. So we can access the alert, we can access the current and the forecast, and we can access the location. So if I go to location and press enter, it's going to give me the location data. And this is what we were seeing on the website. Now, beyond that, I can extrapolate and go further, and I can say location.name, or I could do location.region, or I could go location.country. These are all things that are not possible if you convert it to a formatted list or a formatted table or things like that. So we want to keep it in the PowerShell object form because we can access that data more easily. All right, so let's move on. So let's go ahead and grab the forecast. So we're going to go down here and just make a comment. Let's say grab the forecast for the next 3 days or whatever. And I spelled that wrong, but that's fine. All right, so we're going to make a variable, and we're going to call it forecast. So forecast is going to be equal to converted JSON dot forecast, and let's go to forecast day. So I'll kind of step, actually, before we do that, let's just output this and see what it looks like. I got to get rid of this wireless keyboard. It doesn't want to work for me. So if I output this new variable called forecast, it contains this object called forecast day. Now, if we expand that and we go inside of forecast day, press F8, now we have 3 days, the 24th, which is today, the 25th tomorrow, and then the day after, which is the 26th. And then we have actual forecast information for that day. So if I click here, and let's say we want to access the first day, we could do open brace, 0, closing bracket. Is that a bracket? I think it's a bracket. And if I press F8, now when we output forecast, it's just going to output the first one. So I can now access forecast day. I can access, and this is all the information like the minimum average temperature. I have the condition, and we have humidity, average humidity, and things like that. So what we really want to do is let's create a script that will go over all of the days in this forecast, and it'll tell us what the high is going to be, what the low is going to be, if it's going to rain, and things like that. Okay, so we can do that, if you guys remember, with a for each, because this is a PowerShell object, and it has a list or an array of objects. So we can iterate over each of these lines, and we can create a script that is going to actually, tell us what the information is that we want to know. So let's make a comment and say iterate over the forecast and output the data. And we're going to say for each. And a for each, in my opinion, is appropriate because we don't have to define an index, and we don't have to define how many times we're going to count up to. We don't have to figure out how many elements are in there. A for each will just, for each particular object in there, it'll iterate over all of them. So we don't have to tell it, count from 0 to 3 or something, or from 1 to 3 or 0 to 2. For each is much more appropriate in this specific scenario than a for loop. So we're going to say for day in, and it's going to be in the forecast. Okay. And we can just do something like write -host, and we can just output day and just see what happens here. So if I grab this and I press F8, it outputs each day. So I can see that I'm accessing each day. And if I wanted to do something like for each day dot, and I could say date. And if I just run this, it's going to output the date for each day. So we're on to something. Now let's kind of like take this further. Let's prep the variables. And let's start by getting the date. So date is going to be equal to day.date. Right? And if we're looking here, we have date. So we're redefining each line here as a day. We're writing that as a day, okay? And then we're able to access each line by calling day and then whatever the column name is. In this case, it's date. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. If it doesn't make sense, let me know in the chat and I will let you, and I'll answer or hopefully help you guys clarify it. All right, so we're gonna say the high, and this is gonna be the high temperature. So this is gonna be day dot day, day again. And then inside of day, it's gonna be dot, and here I can kind of browse through and see what we have here. So we have max temperature in Fahrenheit. So I could do Celsius or Fahrenheit. We're gonna go with Fahrenheit, okay? And we'll make a variable called low, and that'll be equal to day dot day. And it'll be, I think it's min temperature Fahrenheit. And then we can make a variable for condition, and that's gonna be equal to day dot day. Oops, there we go. And condition dot text. So I kind of know this because I've already done this, but the way that I would figure this out if I didn't know is I would just, because I've already run this for loop, I have day loaded into memory, so I could just output day, and then I could say day dot day. Let's see what's inside of day. And then inside of day, I have condition. So let's see what's inside of condition. And inside of here, I have something called text, and that says partly cloudy, and that looks like something that I'd want to use. So I'm going to say text, and we have partly cloudy. So I'm assigning the condition to the value of that object. All right, and if we wanted to do, we could do wind too. Max wind is equal to day day. Let's see, max wind in miles an hour. Why not? Okay, and then we could do minimum wind or min wind is equal to day dot minimum. Let's see, what would that? Do they? I don't know if they actually have a minimum wind. Let's see. We have maximum wind. Yeah, there's not going to be a minimum wind. I guess that makes sense. So we could do something like UV. Okay, UV index. All right. Okay. So now we could just say output the weather for today. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a write host command, and it's going to say that in quotation marks date. So it's saying today is going to have a high of high, and that's the variable name high, with a low temperature, and we'll say low. Let's make a period and then say the max wind will be max wind. Okay, and we'll just close that there, and we'll put in UV index after the high. It'll be a high with a UV index of UV index, and we'll say the low temperature today will be low. Okay, so if I just highlight this and I press F8, this is what it outputs. It says 2020-07-26, which is today's date, is going to have a high of 97.5 with a UV index of 10. The low temperature of today will be 76.3 degrees Fahrenheit, and the max wind will be 8.1, and we could say miles an hour, mph. And we could change these to be like Fahrenheit, or we could just add F after, so that it's a little bit more obvious that we're talking about Fahrenheit and not, I mean, I guess 97 Celsius would be kind of ridiculous. So now if I run this command, if I press F5, what's going to happen is it's going to output for all 3 days in the forecast. It's going to say today is going to have a high of 85. Then there's tomorrow, which is the 25th. It tells us the weather for tomorrow with a UV index of 8. And then it tells us what the low will be. Oh, and then I guess I shouldn't be writing today, and I spelled that wrong. The low temperature will be, yeah, I should get rid of today in that sentence. Let's rerun that, because tomorrow is not today, obviously. And let's see, the low temperature, there we go. Run that again. Okay, so now we have it outputting all the information that we want for the next 3 days. And this API, we could do, you know, more days if we paid for it, but that's obviously, we're just learning how to use an API, so it's not necessary. Right now, we're just getting information. Writing information is a whole nother ballpark. Same idea, but it's a little bit more complicated to write information. We're not going to get into that today. So one last thing, we're running like super fast today. I think we're going to be done pretty soon. So one last thing I'm going to show you guys how to do is how to convert this date from a string in this format, how to convert it to something like if we just wanted to output like Friday is going to be like this, Saturday is going to be like that, or if you wanted to change the date format. So what we can do is here under date, we can pipe this. And remember, when we're piping a command, we're taking the output of something and we're passing it along, and then we're able to manipulate that output. So we're going to pipe this, and we're going to say get dash date. We're going to say dash format. And if we go to get dash date, let me pull this up on my web browser so you guys can see how this would work. Get dash date PowerShell. Okay, we have Microsoft documents here. So we have dash format was what we're looking for. Here we go. So we'll see dash format. There we go. Okay, these are the formats that we can use for dash format. So we can do K, I think this outputs, this is a time zone offset. We can do 24-hour format with no seconds. We can do a 4-year digital format, so we could just output the year, which wouldn't make much sense. Or we could do day of the week, full name. So if we wanted to get today's date and just output the day of the week, what we would do is say get dash date format d. And now if we run this command, let me maximize this again. Clear the screen. If I run this again, now we have Friday is going to have a high of 85, and it goes down the line, it says Saturday, and then it says Sunday. And we could change that. So if we wanted to add Friday and then the number of the day, let's see, where is that? That would be day of month and 2-digit. We could say dd, press F5. Let me clear the screen and run that again so it looks cleaner. So Friday 24 is going to be, and that's not the best way to do it. You'd have to write logic for 24th, 25th, or 26th. There might be a format that does that for you too. But that is how you can format your dates and make them look cleaner. Okay. So that is interacting with APIs and making API calls and getting that information and manipulating that information. We're not going to get into writing data. I have to find an API service that we can use for free and actually write data. The APIs that I use obviously hold like personal information, like it has people's home addresses, and we can't work on data like that. So I have to find like an API that we can write to so that we can do another lesson and do it on that. But does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, so here we have, I think most of you guys know about this, but we have the community, and this is where you guys can make student support requests. You can ask for help. It looks like, yeah, Santos, you obviously know about it, so you're already making requests, which is cool. So I usually try to respond as fast as I can. I didn't see this one because I was prepping for the webinar. But yeah, guys, make sure you're taking full advantage of this form here. It's definitely, it can be very helpful. And we're helping people with stuff outside of the scope of server. Like, it doesn't have to be specific to the course, but if you're working on Windows Server at work and you're having problems, you can post here and, we'll help you guys get whatever your issues are fixed. So Corey's asking about the webinar time. Last time I did it at 3 p.m. and that seemed to be too early. Like people were still at work. So today I decided to do it at 5 p.m. Eastern time. If you guys have better time, then, let me know. I'm flexible. I'll do whatever time you guys want. I sent out a survey and most people said Fridays were the best day and sometime in the afternoon. So I'm just trying to pick the best time for everybody.